All right, good. Good morning.
Morning. Are we live?
Yeah.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the House Ag Committee. It's good to see you all again. Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So we're, I believe, talking about S301. And if it's okay with you, there's four of us probably that are planning on talking about the different provisions. And if we could start with, I was planning on going in order, if that works. And section one of the bill is a water quality program. And Laura DePietro, who's the Director of Water Quality, is online to chat with you about it.
Great. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning, everyone.
As you can see, we're sort of at half strength here in the committee room, but we've got a bunch of legislators who are also committee members who are also online and may have questions, and we'll try to get to everybody.
Yeah, I see all of them. Yeah, and I'm actually glad I did not fare the weather this morning. It looks very rough out there. So
Yeah, wise move.
yeah. Um, so this one should be super easy. In the state of Vermont, we created a program to help people seed down areas that we were worried that maybe erosion or other things could happen that would be detrimental to water quality. And the reason we created this program was the federal government generally they have great programs, but they're generally for whole fields. And sometimes that may not be amenable to a farmer. So short of saying, well, there's nothing that anyone can do, we created this space where we said, well, and it may not make sense necessarily to seed down the whole field. It might make sense to just seed down that area or around that area. And so we created this program to basically create flexibility where the federal program didn't have any. And the program has not been super successful, admittedly, because we feel like it has a lot of restrictions that don't allow it to fit into what a farmer may want to commit to. And so we have staff that have been working with UVM Extension. They've been going through and working with students there to talk about what would a good GRAS program look like for these areas. We call them critical source areas. So these higher risk areas in the landscape. And so that process has been going on. We're in a space where this year we're hoping to revise the program. But as we looked at what the statute limitations were, one of them was historically when we created this program, we created it under a capital investment, which usually has to have a long-term investment to be able to use capital funding to do it. We have sufficient clean water money, which is not capital money, to be able to support this program. And so we would like to get rid of the 10-year restriction, which is in statute, so that we can revise the program, make it a little more flexible, and then be able to use the additional funding that we have on the clean water side to be able to support it. To date, this program has been very limited. It is at total we've ever spent was $12,700 on it. So in 6 projects. It has not been a huge program because, again, the federal government tends to have a much better deal. They have a lot higher a payment per acre, and people will go to that if it makes sense for them. So really, it's just this gap space. So that's basically all we'd like to do is reduce that 10-year out of the statute, just remove it, and then go forward, revise our program, and see if we can make an effective program that can help farmers in these spaces.
Questions? Laura, did you say how long when the program was instituted?
I believe it was before 2019, but I could be wrong. Our first projects are from 2019, but we had put it in statute somewhat before that, and it was under the Vermont Ag, filter strip and buffer program. I apologize. I don't know when. It's been a while.
But in any case, there have only been 12, you said 12 projects ever.
6.
What would be what would you like to see? I mean, would you like it to be how big?
Well, I don't think, again, I think we want to utilize the federal money where there's opportunity, and they have really good programs. And again, people go there. But what I see this program opportunity as is where people may want to take risk and try something new that they're not sure how they feel about it yet, right? So for instance, seeding down an area in a field can be rather difficult because of how equipment moves, right? So it's changing how you operate within your field for ease. So that is one thing that they've got to get used to, make sure that it works for them. The other thing that we can do, aside from like seeding down an area in a field, is we could make wider buffers. So people could effectively put their hay strip around their corn instead of having a cornfield and a hay field. And the difference with this program, the major difference between this and the federal programs, is you can harvest these buffers. So they can be harvestable hay strips. So that mindset of switching how corn and hay is put on the landscape so that we can improve runoff potential loss or reduce runoff potential losses. That's the kind of ways we want to try and use the program. So to get people to make change. And historically, what we've seen with programs is that when people are given an opportunity to make a change and reduce the risk to make that change, if it's working for them, they keep doing it, right? And so the long-term need for the commitment, I don't think it's necessarily a thing that we need to be concerned about. Again, it's just getting over that hump of trying it. And once they try it, and if they're successful at it, it will continue, I firmly believe.
The way that the language is, the proposed language is drafted, would a farmer who's be willing to take that chance and is pleased with the results, then be able to come back annually and apply and be reimbursed or compensated every year now rather than every 10 years, or is that not the way that it works currently?
Again, we're going to restructure the program. It all depends. We haven't gotten that far, but certainly the payment would be appropriate given the time frame of payment eligibility, right? So if we paid for a year, like, well, at this point, we've been paying for 10-year commitment. Obviously, we have to change that if we're paying for 1 year, because that's all that we would pay. We wouldn't put them in contracts potentially for longer. We may choose to do 3-year contracts. It all depends, right? We know 10 years is too big of a commitment to say that, yes, I'm willing to do that for that long, because a lot of people, with how dairy is as well now, are not sure where they're going to be in 10 years. That's a big question for a lot of these farms. They could maybe do 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and reasonably have something. So it depends. We'll revise the program if given this ability, but right now we're restricted to 10-year minimum.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions on the program in section 1? Representative O'Brien, see your hand up. And you're muted.
No. There we go. Hi, Laura. How does this work as far as buffers go? Because was it a reference to surface waters of the state? So I just wondered if that means you need a river or a brook of a certain size, or does it work with wetlands or production areas? I mean, what do you see as where a buffer should go to be eligible for this program?
Yep, they either have to be perpendicular or adjacent. So essentially the field needs to abut some water. The goal is again, the proximity to having a risk for sediment or nutrients getting to water needs to be real. So we wouldn't choose a field that has no water near it, right? We're looking it's about water quality and reducing that impact right there.
With wetlands too?
Usually a wetland does, if it's got standing water in it, we would consider it a surface water. So it could.
Okay, thanks. Is that similar with CREP? So more or less your standards would be the same as theirs for the CREP buffer program?
The CREP may have a little bit, it depends on the wetland situation about where they might land. If it has standing water, I do believe that they would. And usually if you have a standing water wetland, there's also like a river or something leaving it, maybe really small, but so usually it would be able to be incorporated. So there may be some differences, but very slight. But the CREP program will still be there. People can still commit to that. Again, the payment, it's about this game of payment rates, right? So that one has a much higher payment rate and benefit and continued payment to the farmer, but it has that 15-year contract commitment. So there still is another program that does that. Again, that program, you cannot harvest those buffers. Those are no-touch buffers that people put in place.
Thank you.
All right. I think we can then move on, Steve, if you want to direct traffic. Questions too, yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Laura. To your question, Mr. Chair, it looks like the program was first adopted in 2005, but it's been amended several times since, so it may have looked significantly different then. I'm not sure, but that's when it was first added to statute. The next sections 2 through 6 are about warehouse licensing, and I'm planning on discussing those with you. And then Tucker Diego, who's our agricultural products manager, is also online and is more personally involved with that process if you have any questions. But essentially, the whole point of these next several sections is just to align disparate licensing sections. So right now, under current law, if you store at least 1,000 pounds of either dairy, meat, fruit, or eggs, you need a warehouse license from us. But anyone who touches meat or dairy also needs a milk handler's license for dairy, or there are a variety of meat licenses that you may need depending on what you do. So and really one sort of discordant way that the current system works is if you have under 1,000 pounds and if you store under 1,000 pounds of meat, you need a meat license, but it costs $150 to do that. And then if you bump up to 1,000 pounds, it's $125 to do that, which is the warehouse license. And it's different renewal dates from January 1st instead of April 1st. So those just don't align well for those people who may be near the 1,000 pound barrier. So really the point is to streamline the licensing. So what we propose is to take dairy and meat out of the public warehouse sphere, put them in the meat and dairy sections so that anybody who's touching dairy or meat will have their appropriate license, but not be part of the public warehouse license. The only other substantive change to what we're proposing for the public warehouse is right now it's fruit and eggs after you take out dairy and meat. And we're proposing that you change that from fruit to produce, which is more expansive because it also includes vegetables, but it just doesn't really make any sense to differentiate between fruit and produce when you're talking about appropriate storage for 1,000 pounds or more. So we've looked at that. We don't know who we don't register, so we're not sure exactly how many other people may be incorporated in the public warehouse license by doing that. We think it's 0 to 4 at most. It may not be anybody. There may be up to 4 producers who currently store 1,000 pounds of vegetables that are not currently licensed, but we really don't know that, and it really could be 0. So, yeah.
Representative Templeman, I see he has a hand up.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. So that 1,000 pound limit, I'm just applying that to my own very small, modest farm operation. It would require me to get one of these permits, or both of the, I guess, meat handling and warehouse permit. And I've got 21 breeding ewes. I'm a very small operation, and I may bring on 4 female cattle for breeding purposes. So that would put me probably at collecting 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of meat a year, and I do store it for the amount of time it takes me to deliver and distribute. And I find this to be a little bit, I don't know, a little overreachy, frankly. And I'm wondering if how you came to this number, this particular weight. What will it require inspection? Like, what's the whole process?
So thank you for that question, Representative Templeman. So first, the goal of what we're proposing is to avoid that sort of duplicative regulation. If you store dairy products or if you store meat, you may need both a public warehouse license for, at least for dairy, and a milk handler's license. We have some folks who currently have both a milk handler's license and a public warehouse license. What we're proposing is that if you are a milk handler, you will no longer need a public warehouse license regardless of the quantity. You will only need a milk handler's license. So that is making sure that people who touch dairy have a milk handler's license, but they don't need another separate license. Under the current meat regimen, you already need either one or the other. You either need a meat license to store under 1,000 pounds, or you need a public warehouse license to store over 1,000 pounds. So this isn't changing that requirement. The 1,000 pounds that is in there, this statute reads as though it's very old. I'm not sure. I'd have to look back at the chapter to see when it was adopted, but I don't know where that number comes from. But the new public warehouse license, if you all approve this proposal, you'll only need a public warehouse license if you store at least 1,000 pounds of either produce or eggs. Meat and dairy will be separate. You already need a meat or dairy license, no matter what you're doing. It would just clarify that you go through dairy or you go through meat. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess I just incriminated myself, and but yeah, thank you. For the clarity. I appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
Yeah, and
May I?
Tucker, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to add a important clarification. The 1,000 pounds is for storage is if you're offering that for hire. So if this would apply to a warehouse that is bringing in is like renting out their space for storage. So if I don't believe it applies to a farm operation that's storing their own products, which is why we have very few licensees under this license.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Tucker.
Representative O'Brien, you have a hand up, but it may be from earlier. Okay.
Yeah, that's a residual hand.
Okay. And the purpose of these licenses and the thinking behind removing the duplication is to be sure that the operations are behaving correctly. So in order to get the license, you need to be.
I mean, it's all about public health, right? All of these licenses are to make sure that people who are handling a certain amount of food are doing it correctly. And because of the heightened risk for dairy and meat, you already always need a license when you're selling dairy or meat products. So the public warehouse is just a sort of a carve out for like Tucker articulated for folks who are storing it for hire. So the point is just to make sure that folks who are storing a lot of food are doing it. They have their appropriate refrigeration, that they're doing it with the right amount of sanitation. So it's just a requirement to make sure that our food, if it's being stored before moved to market, is done so in an appropriate place. But the reason to sort of keep meat, and really I think the trigger for this was the meat licensing with the different April and January 1st deadlines and moving from one to another. And for we have a lot of meat licenses and they're all in a database. They're all in a single database, but because the public warehouse licensing is really quite limited, we do that separately. So it's not in a database, and with the disparate dates, it just creates confusion for folks, and it just is duplicative and unnecessary in our opinion to separate it out like that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I think we're good. Great. Anyway, and that gets
Great. So the next sections 7 through 11 are about a livestock dealer and animal health definitions. And Dr. Kate Levine, who's an assistant state veterinarian in our animal health program, is on to discuss those provisions.
Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So this morning I wanted to talk about the changes that are proposed in the animal health section of the housekeeping bill. All of the changes are designed to clarify both the language and the jurisdictions regarding these sections. So the first is the livestock businesses. Over the last few decades, we periodically have the same debate as to whether someone going around the state, buying livestock, selling some, but processing others in their own slaughter facility need one license, a livestock dealer license, or 2 licenses, in that they might also need a packer's license. We've had 3 different lawyers over almost as many decades tell us all the same answer, which means that's really what it says. But we're trying to make the language clear for the rest of us so we don't have to keep having this same debate. So all of those changes in the packer and license section are just trying to get it so the rest of us understand what the lawyers already agree. 2 licenses are needed for these businesses. The second set of changes are about clarifying the language around domestic animals and livestock. We're trying to move away from listing individual species and subspecies rather than whole categories, because people are farming new things all of the time, and we want to make sure that we don't accidentally disregard one type of deer, but not the other type of deer, when we're trying to set these standards, maintaining the appropriate oversight and health standards required for each of these species. The other thing is that there are some of species where you have a wild type, like our white-tailed deer, and a farmed type, like our reindeer, for example, in this area. And we want to make it very clear that we're only talking about the domestic forms of those animals. And so we're adding domestic in a couple of places where it wasn't otherwise, just so that we're not stepping on any toes and there's no confusion that we're only dealing with the farmed animals, not with the wild type animals, because that is all Fish and Wildlife, and we're happy to leave that there. So those are the big broad themes. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And these are sections, sort of lost track of the sections here.
7 through 11.
7 through 11, okay. All right, any questions on those sections? Right, it seems not at the moment. Dr. Levine, thank you for joining. I guess we can go on then to section 12.
Yep, sections 12 through 16 related to mosquitoes and rodenticides. Dave Huber, who's our Deputy Director of the Farm Division, is here to chat with you about those. And the last section is really a VETA proposal. I think you know that Cassie Polimus is probably the best person to talk to about it. We are generally supportive of it, but it's something that they propose to be able to fund more projects.
Morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, representatives, nice to be before your committee for the first time this session. I'm Dave Huber, Deputy Director of the Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management Division. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about mosquitoes and rodenticides. I'm assuming based on the time you've saved your questions for this half of the presentation. So what the mosquito language is looking to do here is to get everything up to adequate drafting conventions, fix the scrivener's error about the AIB, the Agricultural Innovation Board, and make it clearer as to, we don't have folks who are named engineers or technicians, they're employees of the state, employees of the agency, making sure that larval activities are being modified by the word management, because what is going on is management. Technicians to person, small changes like that, just making sure that it is up to date with the rest of the statute.
So
Representative Rice.
just to clarify, the piece where the AIB is detention previously, and
So we previously had, thank you, Representative Rice, we previously had the VPAC, the Vermont Pesticide Advisory Council. And when the AIB came into existence a couple of years ago, all mentions of VPAC were replaced with AIB. And so this was saying something to the effect of the VPAC would be taking a look at that. AIB is not tasked or charged with that. And so we don't feel it would be appropriate and would like request the committee to accept this change.
So we're on the top of page 13, I think, in the draft. This is section 12.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Section 12, lines 1 through 3.
So then the effect of striking the language is that the secretary or the agency without the advice of the board can proceed.
Without the advice of the Agricultural Innovation Board, yes, there is a public process laid out in the control of pesticides rule, which was recently amended February 23rd, 2023. And so there is a robust public process for the public to provide input and for the agency to review that input, make an informed decision. But the AIB not having anybody on as a member appointed with that expertise, it doesn't make sense to have that language in statute.
Any questions? The Representative Rice.
We talked a little bit yesterday with Ledge Council about, so I'm on the bottom of page 13, line 16, where we're striking larvicides or pesticides and replacing with mosquito control pesticide. Can you just talk us through sort of what that difference is?
Sure. So a biological larvicide or pubicide potentially could be a mosquito control pesticide, but what we're looking for is the properly registered. So we want folks to be using an item that has a label and that is something that they can follow if they're going to be doing that. It provides better tracking for the agency and provides clearer guidance to those who are using the product.
Do you see it as a sort of expansion of the sort of a large scale expansion of the products that would be used in this case?
I don't see this as, and the agency does not see this as being a large scale or any overreach or anything like that as far as the use of pesticides on someone's property. Folks already can use pesticides on their property as long as they own that property. They don't have to have licensure, but what we want to make sure is occurring is that there is a label for somebody to reference just in case they need that information. Okay.
The rodenticide section.
Yes.
We're down in, it's section 15.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Can you just talk a little bit more about that? And again, we did have a walkthrough yesterday, but can you tell us what the intent is here?
Of course. So you should be aware that the EPA is looking to do just this in the near future. There's potential it will be happening in the fall. The agency is taking the proactive measures to tackle this issue prior to the EPA taking any of their language taking effect. And so what this says is a second generation anticoagulant, rodenticide, and I can get into what these are. We abbreviate them SCARs. Happy to go into the difference between FCARs and SCARs and all of that. But what this is looking to do is take the products, there are 4 of them that are second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, and classify these in the state as Class A, which will be a restricted use pesticide. So in order to use these products, there is guidance from the EPA going back to 2008. They promulgated rodenticide guidance for FCARs and SCARs. And so there are 4 available products that are classified as SCARs. This would make sure that the agricultural exemption, which allows them to be sold at a lower classification in the state, is removed, and makes it so that you have to have a license specific to purchasing and using Class A pesticides. So again, this is a bit of a tighter leash around the regulated community and making sure that the products are being used by folks who have adequate training by the agency, keep up to date with continuing education credits, and track records as far as the sales of these products, as well as the usage of them.
Representative Rice.
So this is a great example, I think, of where, so all pesticides regulation exists within the Agency of Agriculture, but obviously second generation anticoagulant rodenticides have a huge impact on sort of natural ecosystems with bioaccumulation up through into predator species of birds, right? Is like the classic problem that we think about with rodenticides specifically. So can you just talk through sort of like what the work looks like between the Agency of Ag and the Agency of Natural Resources in terms of sort of like monitoring how these products are impacting natural populations and sort of when that impacts regulation of pesticides in Vermont?
Sure. So one thing to make very clear is that FIFRA, which is the governing environmental law that oversees all pesticides, and pesticides is the umbrella term for rodenticide, fungicide, insecticide, herbicide, anything that's basically not homicide or suicide is going into that category. And so under FIFRA, which is a very unique environmental law, it doesn't provide delegation. It provides co-regulatorship. And so it designates a state lead agency, and the EPA and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture are co-regulators of FIFRA. And so what the EPA does has equal effect as to what the state does. And that's very different from other environmental laws where there's a delegated authority. A lot of ANR's laws come from delegated authority. This is a very unique one. It's a co-regulatorship type of relationship. So with that in mind, the Agency of Agriculture promulgates regulations that oversee and regulate certification, training, use of pesticides. And again, that's an umbrella term. So rodenticides fall under there. ANR oversees the aquatic nuisance control permit. They do seek advice from the Agency of Agriculture. We provide inspections on those permits as well. But when it comes to bioaccumulation, that is something that is studied over at Fish and Wildlife, one of the 3 departments over there. And so they take a look over there with their biologists as to how rodenticides are affecting certain animal populations. And birds are a great example. What Fish and Wildlife really is looking at, though, are the livers of otters, fishers, and bobcats. And so they monitor those usually through the legal trapping process. Those livers get sent over for scientific data. It's analyzed by Fish and Wildlife. And we are supposed to be working with Fish and Wildlife to report any adverse impacts to wildlife as a state lead agency back to the EPA. So I report those at the end of the year. As they come in, I report them individually, but as a whole to report those to the EPA.
And then sort of if you're seeing sort of an uptick in adverse impact, what are the what steps are you taking, or how would that? Yeah.
So if we receive a complaint, we're legally obligated to go out and conduct an investigation. An investigation would be one of my specialists going out in their geographical territory where the complaint was made and taking a look at, with the case of rodenticides, usually it's a bait station. But what we're finding is that it's not necessarily the companies, the pest management professionals, who are falling short. It's mainly the homeowners, and they're able to buy these products over at stores because it is through this exemption for agricultural use. And so they can go to a Tractor Supply and purchase that pesticide, and then they may not read the label. They could throw it out. We've had a couple of interesting cases that we've received from ANR, and we conduct an investigation into those. That might result in enforcement. The agency doesn't usually take enforcement on homeowners, but with rodenticides, as you said, just the general nature of them being able to be broadcast away from the structure, maybe away from the intended use, we do wind up taking some enforcement actions on homeowners for that. But with this language, what it would do is make it so that that homeowner would not be able to buy that product at the store. It would have to be a pest management professional who could purchase it, make the application, keep the records, and then provide us with those records. Did I answer your question, Representative?
Yeah.
Okay, second generation, when can you talk about first generation and the timing when they were introduced?
Of course. I also have some other, time. We can talk about rodenticides all day. I have some other documents for you too. Just getting into more of Representative Rice's question, what the agency has done. This is a poster. It's made on waterproof paper. We've gone around to every retailer of rodenticides. And asked them, because we don't have the legal authority to tell them to put this up, but we have asked them to put these up in their stores. It says alert, rodent baits, my cell phone number, anytime, the chagrin of my wife. And we also have this QR code. And so if any of you have a phone in the room and are interested in seeing this in real time, for the Senate committee, what I did last, I think it was 2 months ago, I showed it on my phone. It works. You just take a picture of it. It'll take you right to the agency's website. And there's a video narrated by Secretary Tebbetts about the proper usage of rodenticides, along with information as to how to report a complaint and where incidents go. And really, it's telling you always read and follow label directions for use, which in Pesticide Law 101, the label is the law. That's the guiding principle of pesticides. So with these products, with second generations, they came into existence in the 1970s, but in order to get really a good understanding of second generation, you have to know about first generation. These are, I'm going to read a couple of definitions. They're from the EPA, our co-regulator, as I said earlier. So the first generation anticoagulants, they include anticoagulants that were developed as rodenticides prior to 1970. These compounds are much more toxic when feeding occurs on several successive days rather than on one day only. Products such as chlorphacinone, diphacinone, and warfarin are first generation anticoagulants, and those are registered to control rats and mice in the United States. Most of the products that you see on the shelves at these stores are going to be first generation anticoagulants, or they're going to be ready to use bait stations, which do contain second generation, but they make it so that you can't really tamper with those bait stations. This would be getting rid of that.
So are those ready to use ones will also be covered? So those would be
Yes.
available.
Yes.
So can you ask that again? I didn't hear that.
So just confirming that the ready to use bait stations are covered by this language, so they will also not be available sort of off the shelf.
Mm-hmm. And so ready to use bait stations generally are bromethalin, chlorphacinone, and diphacinone. And if they're made for a refillable design, then up to 1 pound of that bait can be sold with that product. So you may see a ready to use bait station RTU, and it comes in packaging with a block of bait. And you're saying, well, I thought he said that we couldn't use that product outside the bait station. They are allowed per the EPA to have a fillable or refillable with 1 pound of bait. And so that's usually sold with that package. So that's first generation. Second generation anticoagulants were developed beginning in the 1970s. And that was to control rodents that are resistant to first generation anticoagulants. And second generation anticoagulants are also more likely than first generation anticoagulants to be able to kill after a single night's feeding, which is why the concern is there for bioaccumulation. These compounds kill over a similar course of time, but they tend to remain in animal tissues longer than do first generation ones. Again, exactly to your point, Representative. These properties mean that second generation products pose greater risk to non-target species that might feed on bait only once, or that might feed upon rodenticides, might feed on animals that have eaten the bait. Due to these risks, SCARs are no longer registered for use in products geared toward consumers, and are registered only for the commercial pest control and structural pest control industries. Second generation anticoagulants registered in the United States include Verdificum, bromadiolone, difenicum, and difethylalone. So that's the difference. One is you're able to have some resistance to first generation, and so they came up with second. But the only downside was that, because they're so potent, there is that concern. And so that's why we want these to be classified as Class A, so that the tool can still be there for those who receive training, and that we hopefully will cut down on any misuse or adverse impacts to wildlife.
Will these become obsolete with this, or are you asking stores to put these up with first generation?
We're asking stores to put these up because what we were finding, also getting to your question, was that these products, the bait blocks, were being sold, but the stores were not telling the person who was purchasing, hey, you also have to buy this bait station. And so the response that we got when we gave this out was an overwhelming, I'm missing out on selling a product, first of all. And second of all, because it's doing good for the wildlife and we want to make sure that there is less of an adverse impact to wildlife. Some stores said that they would hand these out for free, provided that there was a purchase of rodenticide, just to ensure that they're doing their due diligence to make sure that this product was being used in a safe and responsible manner.
So there are other instances in which you are encouraging encouraging display of this poster outside of these SCARs.
We want these posters up at every retailer of rodenticides, including Home Depot or Lowe's or some of these other box stores who don't sell these products, just because we really do want to get it into the consumer's head as well as the retailer. This is either off limits, or if you're going to use it, you have to use it appropriately.
Would you like the authority to require the posting of such information?
That is up to the committee. I don't believe that we would have a position on that.
We just haven't discussed that.
How new is this poster?
We put them up in June. I threw my back out June 24th. And so I think we put them up June 25th. I remember that day.
Yeah.
Can you just give us another quick tutorial, Dave, on Class A,
Yes,
B, and C? Is that?
of course. Okay, so Class C is going to be the homeowner use of pesticides. And this is also all documented in our rule, the pesticide rule. And so we have three classes. Class C is for homeowner use. So that's going to be the products that you can buy at a gas station, the products that you can buy for the most part at Home Depot, Lowe's, box stores, farm stores, tractor stores like Tractor Supply. You can buy those many places. Dick's Sporting Goods, anywhere that's going to sell off mosquito spray, anything like that, you're going to find a Class C retail license. And so that's geared towards folks who you can use that by reading a very small label, easy for the homeowner to read, and there's not going to be much negative or adverse impact from using those products.
And
if you use them according to the label.
As a retailer, I do need a license, Class C license to sell them. And does obtaining a license require anything other than
$25
a fee? Yeah. Okay.
And we get those out very quickly as soon as they're requested. As long as we have a check for $25 per location, brick and mortar, one for the internet, then we're able to accept that and provide a Class C license.
Representative O'Brien on Zoom has his hand up.
Dave, I just had a jurisdictional question. If FIFRA is this co-delegation between the agency and EPA, what happens in the case where those two bodies are in disagreement, say over a ban or a product? Does it end up in court?
So, Representative, it's a co-regulatorship. Just want to make sure that the clarity is there on that term. It's not anything dealing with delegation. The more restrictive would be going into effect. So the EPA is not going to say to the state, you should not be being more restrictive on this product. And if the EPA is making something more restrictive, then the states do get together with the EPA on an extremely regular basis to talk these through so that there are no surprises. The agency, and for that matter, all state lead agencies for FIFRA, are not looking to take the EPA to court. The EPA certainly is not looking to take these states to court. If there was anything where a state loses its authority over pesticides, the EPA would have to step in that situation and provide inspectors. They do not have the resources to do that. And so that's why the states are there, boots on the ground, to provide education and certification on behalf of the EPA as well as the state's regulations.
If I could
Okay,
just, sorry.
Go ahead, John.
So just in both those organizations defer to the more restrictive legislation.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. If I could just add, we have that co-regulatory relationship, but federal law also trumps in some important ways, and we can't do less than the EPA requires. So it depends on what's involved, but as specifically for labeling, like we can't do something that contradicts what the EPA approves for a label. We can be more restrictive, as Dave said. Doesn't mean we won't get challenged for doing that. But federal law does, because of the supremacy clause, whenever the federal law lays out certain requirements, we have to adhere to those.
But say there is a label that the EPA approves and the state does not feel is appropriate for state use, the state can reclassify that product.
So I cut you off. You had just finished talking about Class C. Yeah.
That's Class C. Class B, these are considered restricted sales products. Now, any homeowner can still go and purchase at Home Depot weed and feed for your lawn, but that is a Class B product. Almost all turf products are Class B. When it comes to rodenticides, bromethalin, chlorphacinone, difascinone, cholecalciferol, zinc phosphide, which is usually used by federal agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to carry out their initiatives. They usually use zinc phosphide. And for those rodenticides, in order to be classified as a Class B, they have to contain at least 4 pounds of bait in a bucket, but it could be larger, just has to be at least 4 pounds. It can be block, pellet, or paste, but it cannot be RTU, ready to use in a bait station. But the label has to direct the use in a bait station if outdoors. So it's a little more restrictive when it comes to rodenticides because there's that ag exemption. And again, this would be removing that exemption so that these products are classified higher than B. Products labeled for use around ag buildings currently are brodifacoum, bromadiolone, difenicum, difenthiolone, and those are sold in minimum 8 pounds for ag use. And they have to contain a statement that says, do not use this product in homes or other human residences. Apologies. No school today. So you cannot use these products in homes or other human residences. When it comes to the products that you're looking to buy over at, a Tractor Supply or any of these other stores, most of those stores have Class B dealer licenses, which allows them to sell Class C and Class B. And for that, they do have to take a dealer exam. So, and in order to take the exam, you have to fly into Vermont and take it here. So if you're outside of Vermont and you are selling online, then we require you to have a full-time employee who has 32 hours or more at that location, wherever it is, and they have to come into the state to sit for the exam. And again, that's all outlined in the rule as well. So at a store such as, just picking on a box store, but if you're at a box store and you're selling weed and feed, any turf product, then there has to be a licensed dealer in the store, 32 hours or more, full-time employee who can answer the questions and make sure that spills are cleaned up. And, if anyone from the public has a question, there should be somebody there to answer it. Class A is state restricted and federal restricted. So the feds might want to restrict a product and they have a list. We honor that. Then if we want to restrict a product even further, because the feds say that it's not at a federal level, it's not something that needs to be restricted further, but we think it might, then we can make something a state restricted product. In this example, with this potential bill, that would be a rodenticide, specifically the second generations. We're looking to use our authority to make it a second generation, a state restricted product because it is not yet a federally restricted use product.
I don't see any hands. I do see a reminder that we're nearing the end of the hour and alarms are going off all over the place. are there any other questions about the first 16 sections of the bill? We will get testimony from Vita on, if I've got the numbers right, sections beyond that. And we can have the agency back in if there are other questions that come up. If not, thank you both, those of you who are here, and to everyone who's not here in person. Thank you for joining us this morning online. We will break for about 10 minutes for our next segment.
Thank you.